Hey everyone, Smarty Pants Chess here. I just thought today I'd go for a game between Leela and Scorpio in a bullet test match with 1 minute each on the clock and 1 second increments. In the game, Leela Chess 0 is playing white, Scorpio is playing black, and the book move is only a free move, so it's e4 d6, d4 knight to f6, knight c3 and c6. So we're into a perk defense. And Leela plays the aggressive move f4, just getting more space in the centre, and Scorpio plays a crafty move, queen a5. The idea behind this is to try and eat the pawn on e4 because the knight on c3 is now pinned, so it can't defend the pawn. So white plays bishop to d3. Again, these are all standard moves played in this opening. Scorpio plays e5, hitting in the centre, and white plays knight to f3. Doesn't care about this e5 move, doesn't have to take it, and just develops rather nicely. Black takes on d4, the knight takes, and black plays g6, preparing a fianchetto, and white now castles kingside, black fianchettos, and Leela packs a king into the corner just to stop any moves like queen to b6 or queen to c5, which would be rather annoying, especially if white moves the knight off d4. Scorpio castled, and white played the move f5, and this move has been seen many times, and this is part of the opening book actually. And the play continues, knight to b to d7. So black is rather solid, but white's got a nice attack coming. Queen e1 was played, and I think maybe Scorpio was a bit enthusiastic. He played the move d5, hitting the e4 pawn, but this now allows white to play the move e5, hitting the knight on f6, and already I feel like white has some sort of advantage right here, because after the knight moves to g4, I think Leela missed a good move here actually, which is probably understandable in a bullet game, but I think the move f6 was really good here, because it hits the bishop on g7, and if this bishop moves to h6, this is terrible because then bishop takes, knight takes, and white can play queen h4, attacking the knight, and the only square for the knight really is to play knight to g4, where white can actually just take it. Of course white can lose a pawn on e4, but still white's in a far superior position, so definitely f6 was a nice move. Of course black can drop the bishop back to h8, but then comes knight to f5, threatening knight to e7, and if black captures this, they can recapture with the rook, so sacrifice a knight, and play would continue, knight takes e5, rook takes e5, bishop takes f6, and rook h5. So white's engaging black and attacking this h7 pawn. Play continues, queen c7 and bishop to g5. After takes, king h8, queen h4, f5 to stop this bishop from attacking this pawn and using the queen to protect it. White can play rook to f1, and it seems as though white has a good edge in this position. White is a pawn down, but is threatening moves like rook takes g4 because this rook pins this rook, and this bishop on c8 actually can't get out because of these two pawns in the way. So definitely, if I was playing this position, I'd definitely prefer white. f6 wasn't played in the game though. Leela preferred to move e6, hitting the knight on d7. The knight jumped in to e5, and Leela played h3, attacking the knight on g4. So black is now forced to play an intermezzo move, knight takes the bishop with d3, attacking the queen, and Leela takes, and bishop takes d4 is played, h takes g4 is played by Leela. And again I think Leela missed a really good move. e7 was also an option, attacking the rook on f8. If it moves, now play h takes g4. The point is white can play the move f6 and lock that rook on e8 into position. Play will continue queen c7, but then white can play f6. Black can play queen to d7, but after queen h4 takes queen h6, black will be forced to play queen h5, trade queens, and white just plays bishop d2. And Leela would have an immense pawn structure with these two pawns on the 6th and 7th rank, and that would be a major problem for black's position. So already after bishop takes d4, Leela actually played h takes g4, but again I don't think white's got any problems. Play continued f takes e6, and Leela played bishop h6, attacking the rook on f8. So what happens if black parries this and blocks it with bishop g7? Well, this actually loses to bishop takes g7 amazingly. If black takes, then queen e5 is a massive threat. For instance, if king g8, f takes g6, rook takes f1, rook takes f1, and h takes g6, white can play moves like queen f6. And black's got no protection against the queen and the rook. The queen can take on g6 and also threatening moves like queen to f8 and queen to f7. So yeah, black is screwed in this position. So bishop h6 was a very good move, and it forces black to give the exchange. Scorpio played queen to d8, white takes, queen recaptured, and Leela played queen h4 after winning the exchange. However, white does have to give up several pawns for this. So play continued, takes an f5, white recaptured, and Scorpio played bishop f6, attacking the queen, and Leela retreats the queen back to h2, and black takes on f5. So what's the material like in this position? Well, white's the exchange up, but black has 2 extra pawns, so you could argue it's equal on points, but I don't know, I prefer white's position most definitely here, because their pieces are really easy to get into the centre, and the bishop on c8 and the rook haven't been developed yet for black, so I think white's got the edge. So in the game, Leela played knight to e2. This looks like an unusual move, because why doesn't black just take on b2 and win another pawn? Well, maybe white's attack is too fast, because after rook a1, bishop g7, knight to f4, maybe white is coming in after bishop d7 and rook to e3. I feel like white's got a really nice attack. They can play moves like rook h3, rook to g3, maybe even knight h5. And this rook on f1 is a great piece as well, pinning the f-pawn. So even though black's just won another pawn, I don't feel like it actually gained anything. So after knight to e2, Scorpio actually played the move bishop d7. I think this was wise, just trying to develop. Leela continued with knight to g3, attacking the f5 pawn, and now black played queen to d6. So why doesn't white just capture on f5? Black can take on h2 with check, the king will recapture, and black can play rook e8, and after rook f2, bishop takes f5, rook takes f5, black could play bishop to b2 here, and if rook b1, play rook e2. And it's not so easy for white now. Even though the exchange up, this bishop has become very powerful, and black still has a lot more pawns than white. So after queen to d6, it makes sense that Leela didn't capture this pawn straight away anyway. Leela played queen h6, so trying to trade this bishop for the knight. But Scorpio didn't take on g3, Scorpio just played queen f8. Leela retreated, and Scorpio played king h8, getting the king safe and trying to use this g-file with the queen. White takes on f5, queen g8 was played, and rook f2 to solidify everything, so protecting this pawn, and trying to double rooks. Scorpio played queen to g6, and white doubled rooks, and Scorpio played rook to e8. So all the pieces have been developed in the game now, and Leela solidifies the knight on f5 by playing the move g4. So Scorpio takes, and the rook recaptured. So now 2 rooks are attacking the bishop on f6, so finally Scorpio does take on b2. But now Leela gains a grip on the game with rook f8, check, and after king to g7, Leela plays queen to f3, and this stops black from trading rooks on f8, because if queen takes f8 it would be checkmate. Scorpio continued with bishop to c3. And here Stockfish actually thinks Leela missed a win, because queen f4 was given as a really good move for white. The point is it's threatening queen c7. If black tries to block with bishop to e5, then white can play queen f7, check. If the queen takes, then the rook takes with check, and after king g6, white can take on e8, and if king takes f7, there's rook takes e5, and this should be an easy endgame win for white. After queen f4 as well, let's say black plays a move like b6, queen c7 can be played with check, And if king h6, there's a nice move with g5. If queen takes g5, this clears the lines for the g file, and white can play moves like queen h2, and black is pretty much forced to play queen h5 here. But now comes moves like rook to f6, takes with check, and king g7, and black will lose a queen. Queen takes h5, rook e1, king g2, and takes, and check again. So white's in a vastly superior position. So queen f4 here was definitely a great move for white. But Leela continued with the move rook f7 instead with check. The king went to g8 and Leela captured the pawn on b7. Scorpio checked and the king went to g2. The bishop retreated back, and here Leela did actually play queen to f4, but Scorpio sidestepped with queen h4, and rook to b8 was played, and a trade of rooks occurred with check, and Scorpio put their bishop back to d8. So black's attacking the g4 pawn, the queen retreats to protect and also threaten mates on f8, and Scorpio retreats their queen to e7 to defend. Leela plays rook to f3, and I'll go quite quickly through the next series of moves because there's quite a lot of them and a lot of it was just manoeuvring. So king g7, and after, let's say, a series of moves with check, Leela's just sort of shuffling around trying to get the ideal position. So they push the g pawn, and now black's played queen to g6. Leela goes back with rook to f3, and again another series of moves. And slowly Leela is improving their position. So they've just pushed all the pawns to their maximum capacity. And pretty much after every sequence of checks, Scorpio is forced to go back to queen to e8. So here queen e5 was played, trying to trade queens. Check was played, king h4, and basically once the king gets to h5, it seems like Leela's got the first ideal position. So here there's no real way black can improve. They play the move bishop to e7. Leela plays queen to e5 and is dominating the board with his queen now in the centre. Scorpio played the move c5 and queen f5 was played. Queen e8 check, king g4, and takes on d4. And this now allows Leela to take on d5 with check. After king h8, Leela takes. And the pawn situation is now equal. Both sides have two pawns, but now Leela has the exchange. Scorpio moved the king to g8, and Leela pinned the bishop against the queen. Scorpio checked, the king moves away. The queen goes back to protect everything. But now Leela finishes the job. There's check, king g7, king g4, check again, but now queen to e6. Now the bishop on e7 is attacked, and the queen is also attacked at the same time. So Scorpio has to swap queens, but actually they played the move queen to c1 instead. Takes on e7 was played, king g8, queen e6, king g7, queen f6 check, king g8, and Leela finished the job with rook to e8, checkmate. So this looked like it was all in a day's work for Leela. It was a very nice game that she played once again, and Scorpio just didn't have an answer to Leela's attack really. I probably brushed over the endgame moves rather quickly, but basically Leela was just slowly improving her position and optimising the use of the rook against the bishop. And it felt like there was not a lot of Scorpio could do. I think Leela could have won quicker in this position by just playing f6, but still it was a very nice game. If you think I missed anything, please do comment and let me know. I love reading the comments to see what you guys have come up with. But anyway, hope you enjoyed the analysis of this video. Please drop me a like, comment or subscribe if you want to watch any future videos. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.